Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. I am putting this video up on YouTube so that you can share it and wake other people up. They will be defensive at first because that's what happens when you shock someone's system. But I'm going to show you some things from this event that occurred in Georgia. And of course, my prayers go out to all the victims. My prayers go out to George Glass, Jane and John Doe, and everybody else involved. And I want to make sure everybody out there knows that there's a good chance that this video ruffles some feathers. So just make sure that you are following me in all the other locations where you can find my content. And this is a video I would normally upload only to the website, but I'm putting it out here for you to see and you to share and to just do what I call common sense logic. That's what we need to spread to people, just using basic common sense. But they aren't trained to look at the news and to question it. They are trained to look at the news and think that that is reality. But if we all use common sense and we all use common sense logic, we could start waking people up from the simulated reality that they are living in, believing that the news is actually real. So let's get into the event that happened down in Georgia. If you haven't heard yet, the alleged gunman enrolled at the school 2 weeks before this event actually occurred. That's very important to note as I show you some of the interviews with some of the fellow classmates and moms of some of the students at the school, because then you could use common sense logic and you could start piecing together how this story doesn't make sense, but it also matches a lot of the other stories that we hear about at other schools, right? Where a student is just enrolling at a school. And in fact, in this case, the student who goes by the name of Colt Gray, which might as well be code name for George Glass or John Doe, Colt Gray had only been at school 2 days. This was his second day at school. It's very important to note that, as I'll show you throughout the video from some of the witnesses and some of the people that they put on national television telling us all about his character and who he is and how he was in the back of the room and he was quiet and he would take the bathroom pass. All these things they tell us, but for somebody who's only at school on their second day, they sure seem to know a lot about some of his character traits. So let me start by airing this for you. This aired on local media in Georgia, where they openly tell you that he was only enrolled at the school for 2 weeks, which means he popped up at the school, which tells us that this is a government operation. He popped up at the school, and this was only his second day.
Yeah, Ron, the Barrow County Sheriff telling us that Colt Gray only enrolled about 2 weeks ago, and actually yesterday was only his second day as a student inside the school. Colt Gray only enrolled about 2 weeks ago, and actually yesterday was only his second day as a student inside the school. Second day as a student inside the school.
So then what we need to do is start looking at the common themes, right? You might remember the event that happened up at the Hook, right? The Hook of the Sandy. And the shooter there, just like the shooter here, had zero motive, right? Most of the time, we're trained to look at a lot of these crime shows or just use common sense logic, right? You would look at a situation and say, well, what's this person's motive? But when it comes to these events, there's never an actual motive. The Hook at Sandy, that supposed shooter, didn't even attend that school, if it was even really a school that was actively open at the time. He just showed up there. He had no motive. There was nobody there that did anything to him. He just decided to choose that school, right? Which had been closed for a long period of time before that event just conveniently occurred. Well, same here with this guy. He's got no motive. He doesn't know anybody at the school. He just popped up at the school. But if you listen to the interviews I'm about to play for you, well, it seems like there's some character traits to this person who just popped up at the school. I mean, if you were only in school for 2 days, right? Let's just use this, let's think to ourselves, right? You're sitting there, think of something in your day-to-day life, where you work, right? If somebody showed up at work for their first day of work, okay, all you would know is what they did on their first day, but you probably wouldn't even notice. You go, oh, there's the new guy, right? Well, it seems like they know a lot about this guy because it sounds like from the way that these people who are involved in the case, one of the girls who was sitting next to him and a classmate, it sounds like they've known him for a long time. It sounds like they weren't aware that the narrative was going to get out, that he'd only been enrolled at the school for 2 weeks and it was only his second day. They make it sound like Well, they have a lot of details about him, how he's the quiet type. That's a lot to say for the second day of school to already know that somebody's the quiet type after their first day, because common sense logic would tell us after your first day of school at a new school, of course you're going to be quiet because you're new. But they make it sound like, oh, he's the quiet type. He likes to take the pass out to go to the bathroom and come back, and sometimes he doesn't even come back to the classroom with the bathroom pass. All this stuff doesn't really fit the narrative after you hear that he was a brand new student at the school. Listen to the suspects and note, of course, the duping delight, because they're always smiling after traumatic events. It's pretty incredible.
You said there was a pattern, though, with this particular student that even your daughter noticed. Can you tell us and the viewers about that pattern?
From what my daughter told me, he comes to class and he'll sign out to use the bathroom but not take the pass. And he'll leave class, and sometimes he'll come back and sometimes he won't. And today that's what he did. He was there when she got in class, and then he went and signed out and said he was going to the bathroom but didn't take the pass and left the classroom. And a little bit later, that's when he started shooting.
And you hear the gunshots, you kind of like know.
You knew that something very bad was happening next door. Did he ever say anything?
No, he never really talked. He was pretty quiet. He wasn't there most times. Either he just didn't come to school or he just would skip class. But even when he would have talked, it was one-word answers or just short statements.
You told me off camera you weren't surprised that he would be the shooter. Why is that?
Just because when you think of like shooters and how they act or things that they do, it's usually the quiet kid, or like that's a stereotype for it to be, and he was the one that fit that description in our class.
So when you hear those clips, the common person out there who's completely asleep to how the government works will say, what are you getting at? What are you getting at? You can't tell me that even if the government orchestrated something like this, and they orchestrate all of them, these events, how in the world could you say that there's kids who are in on it, right? How could you say there's kids who are in on it? Because they don't understand how this works. Secret societies run everything. There's a secret society in your town, Freemasonry, Eastern Star. What they do is they practice occult practice, right? And they're groomers. They actually have secret societies for children. You just don't realize it, right? Because they've been trained not to really tell you about it. But if you look closely, you'll see that there's not only secret societies in your town, there's ones geared towards kids. So they groom children at a young age. And the Masonic youth is trained in occult philosophy. The Rainbow Girls, the Order of Demolay, and Job's Daughters are three of the specific groups where Freemasons and Eastern Star witches, that's what they are, train these children. Now, you might say, well, what? They're going to train a kid to go to a school and lie? Well, if you knew what their ideologies were and what they're trying to ingrain in these kids' minds, you would realize that they believe what they're doing is for the betterment of humanity. So by creating events like this, they believe that it's for the betterment of humanity. These kids do, at least. The older ones, the Freemasons and the people who are grooming them know what the end game agenda is, right? To remove guns from people's homes. The guns will be in the hand of the government only. Civilians will not be able to defend themselves. These kids don't know any better. They tell them that things like this are for the betterment of humanity because guns are bad, guns kill people, right? And of course, there's truth to guns being bad, but there's also truth to, well, if the government has them, then civilians should be able to have them, right? That's just common sense logic. Right? If we're going to eradicate guns from the face of the earth, I'm all for it. That means every single gun has to be eradicated. That's not physically possible. Thus, we can't do that because we can't allow people that we don't know, that we shouldn't trust automatically, to have guns while the rest of us don't, because they could come to your door and they could turn on you in a blink, and you're already seeing them do that now. So the girl in that clip obviously contradicts the whole entire story. So does the mother in that clip, right? They're giving you a background on this guy, Colt Gray, aka John Doe. And they're telling you, well, this is the stereotype. He fits the stereotype of the quiet kid. But how do they even know he's the quiet kid? How do they know that he goes to the bathroom and doesn't return if it's only his second day at school? Well, of course, the answer is that they don't. That they don't, because the kid was placed there. Now, you might say, well, how can you get from the point of the kid being on his second day, in his second day, only enrolled at the school in 2 weeks, to being a government asset? Well, this is how I get to that point. If you didn't hear, the FBI had already interviewed and sat with this child a year prior at the age of 13, and with the child's parents, which I'll get into after I show you this clip. So there's a direct connection between this child and the FBI. There's a direct connection between the government and this student, right? And the direct connection is that they've already been in contact. He's already been at FBI headquarters. And if you're not familiar, the government has an operation called Orion. This is from Bill Cooper's book in the early 90s, before Columbine and a lot of these school events started occurring. The government encouraged the manufacture and importation of military firearms for the criminals to use. This is intended to foster a feeling of insecurity which would lead the American people to voluntarily disarm themselves by passing laws against firearms, using drugs and hypnosis on mental patients in a process called Orion. The CIA inculcated the desire in these people to open fire on schoolyards and thus inflame the anti-gun lobby. This plan is well underway and so far is working perfectly. The middle class is begging the government to do away with the Second Amendment. There's a reason you didn't hear about any of these types of events in the 70s and 80s, because this became a government operation in the 90s. And there's also a reason that every one of these shooters looks the same. Do they not all look the same? Do they not all have a similar mysterious background story to them? Because the government is taking these children whose parents are openly, because remember, in secret societies, and this goes for covens, which is one and the same, okay, if you don't know how it works, the parents put their children into these rituals. They don't look at their children the same way a normal person would look at their children. Their children are groomed at a very young age, and their children are given up as to the government, to whatever is needed for the brotherhood, for the betterment of the brotherhood. That's how secret societies work. So this child was put through a lot of trauma-based mind control. And when I'm talking about the FBI coming and meeting this child, it's also important to note this clip from the mother, who you just saw previously, who talked about how 30 minutes before this occurred, this student was taken out of the classroom. They got the names mixed up, and then this student was brought back to the classroom, which again, if you know how Manchurian candidates work, they can activate these trained assassins at any time. Some call them super soldiers, some just call them Manchurian candidates. But listen to this clip that I used over on the website. I want to play it again real quick, of the mother talking about this very bizarre thing that occurred right before this event went down, where this kid was brought out of the classroom, then brought back to the classroom. I'm going to assume if they brought him out of the classroom, they would have patted him down if they thought something was going on, if they got a phone call about something going down. But of course, he came back armed, right? Because that makes no sense whatsoever.
Absolutely. So as we were doing the news conference and we were getting that new information, Rebecca's voice could be heard sort of over the reporters for a clear reason. Is because she's a parent at this school. She has some concerns about what's actually being said. You said that you believe there was a call that came in earlier today that gave them an alert, and they might have actually already been looking for the student when the shooting happened?
From what everybody's saying, there was a call at 9:30 this morning, but I don't know how true that is. All I know is that a school female worker came looking for the kid about 10 to 15 minutes before he came back and started shooting. They got the wrong kid. They had the names mixed up, and she left. And about 10 to 15 minutes after she left the class, that's when he came back and approached the door that my daughter was in. And a girl went up to let him in, but saw that he had a gun, and she backed away. And I guess that's when he just started shooting everybody else.
I saw the sheriff walk over to you. What was that conversation afterwards? Because obviously, I know you're a little angry because your daughter was in that class.
I basically just feel like he was calling me a liar, saying that the staff member wasn't looking for the shooter, that she was looking for the kid whose names they mixed up. But you can't tell me it's a coincidence that you're looking for somebody with that name, and 15 minutes later he shoots up the school. The school should have been put in lockdown the moment they went looking for him.
So in addition to that, we can now see there's a direct connection between the government and this kid. This isn't just some random kid who the government's never heard of, who's off the radar. He has a direct connection to the FBI. The next thing we need to look at is this other narrative that's quietly out there. Because remember, in global communism, your children belong to the state. It's very important for people to understand what's happening here. It's communism. You can watch old 1950s propaganda videos on what communism looks like. It's the woke movement. It's the same thing repackaged so that people out there who are Democrats don't realize that it's communism, and they don't. The shooter, the kid, okay? His father supposedly, of course, gifted him a gun for Christmas. So let me get this straight. He's on the FBI's radar. The FBI has met with him, right? So there's a direct connection. The father decides to give the kid a gun, right? Which, of course, would be illegal. But this is the next thing that you're going to start seeing implemented, and there is a pattern here. It is called guilt by association, convicting people of crimes that they themselves do not commit. And soon this will be occurring for people like us with free speech. So in other words, when we cover videos like this, all they need to do is make up a fake news story and say that somebody went to this place or that place because they heard a YouTuber or somebody on Facebook post something saying that this person or Freemasons do this or they do that, and they went and committed a crime. And then they'll have the ability to arrest us for things like second-degree murder. Because guess what? The father involved has been arrested for second-degree murder. And of course, conveniently, the thing that he bought for his son happens to be an AR-style rifle, because that's how this narrative works. Every one of these events has got to be an AR-style rifle. That's the one that they're obsessed with, because thus that would arm civilians in the case of some type of combat situation where the government admits that they finally gone rogue against them. But here's the story about the father.
And Blaine, you mentioned that case in Georgia. There is another arrest this morning connected to that deadly school shooting that happened Wednesday.
Yeah, this morning authorities now announcing that they have arrested the father of the 14-year-old accused of killing 4 people at that high school in Winder, Georgia on Wednesday. Colin Gray is now being charged with second-degree murder as well as a number of counts of involuntary manslaughter and cruelty to children. Investigators say the 54-year-old, the father, bought the AR-style gun used in the shooting as a gift for his son, Colt, whose picture you see there.
So, of course, right? And then the other stories that come out is that the shooter, Colt Gray, comes from a broken home. The mom had multiple drug arrests. The dad gave him an AR-15 for Christmas. This is instilling the narrative of the state having control over your children. I've covered this for a while. I've shown you some of the clips from even MSNBC talking about the children belong to the community.
We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had kind of a private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a very collective notion of these are our children. So part of it is we have to break through our kind of private idea that kids belong to their parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments.
You've heard Kamala Harris. You've heard a lot of these psychopathic liberals talking about the children belonging to everyone. And that's what this ultimately leads towards, because this has to do with the removal of God and then brainwashing children. They want to make sure the kids get brainwashed with their communist propaganda, which means that men could have babies, you're born this way, all this stuff that's make-believe psychotic stuff, they're going to instill on your kids. Some of the stuff out there in regards to him, to the shooter and his background, no clean clothes at his home, constant abuse. This is the grandfather, of course, giving an interview immediately with CNN, because that's how this works. Nobody grieves, nobody deals. Somehow CNN gets in direct contact with them. They're willing to give interviews, right? He says dad beat him up, so he came from a home where he's physically abused. So now the shooter itself is a victim. And I'm sure what'll come out next is that the father was MAGA, was alt-right. This plays into the narrative perfectly, right? He's all right. The father was listening to conspiracy theories. I'm sure that'll be the next stuff that comes out. That's not out as of now. And I've quietly been paying attention to this narrative, right? Because, again, guilt by association is a big thing. There have been multiple shootings that have been happening at other schools where the parents are being put in prison because of something that their children do. In Michigan, we had the parents of a supposed shooter sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison for manslaughter, for having a gun in the home that wasn't safely secured. So you can't really define safely secured, right? You could have a safe, but if your kid knows the passcode to the safe in case of an emergency, well, and he goes in and he does that, guess what? You're guilty for it. We're starting to allow the government to prosecute people based on actions that someone else commits. And this is, again, they're doing this specifically with parents and their children because they're trying to remove the parents' control over the children. That is a communist society. So we had the story in Michigan. We have a story in Texas where the parents are going to civil trial. And they're going to civil trial because the parents of the victims are suing those parents because they had a gun in their home and the kid took the gun and the kid went to school with it. So the parents should be held liable. Now the parents are going to lose all their assets and their money, kind of like the scam trial we saw with Alex Jones, where he supposedly lost all this money just from talking about it. That's what all this stuff connects to. If people out there aren't paying attention, guess what? Pay attention. This is global communism. That's what this is. They're changing the laws as they go. And people are getting so caught up in the stories that they're not paying attention to their human rights, to their basic God-given rights. They're not paying attention to that because they believe the news is real. And that's the shell you need to come out of. It's not that the news is just conveniently fake and they say fake news when it happens to be about their political figure that they're voting for, right? That's what they want you to think, and stop there. Oh, CNN's fake news because they're slamming Donald Trump. Oh, Fox News is fake news because they're pushing, stuff that's against Democrats, right? That's where they want you to stop with the fake news narrative. But if you realize the news itself is scripted, that these stories and events that occur that you think are real are actually carried out black ops government operations, then you start saying to yourself, wait a minute, so none of this stuff happened. None of this, so you emotionally pull yourself out. And you say, okay, in some cases they do happen. In some cases they do actually occur. Those would be called false flags, which means there are actual victims. I don't know in this case if there are or not, but there are actual victims in some of the events. And then in other ones, they're called psychological operations because none of the people existed in the first place. They don't need to show you evidence. They don't need to go to trial. They just tell you the story, and then you're under hypnosis, so you believe the story. And then they want you to get mad at people like me who are doing something no different than anybody else would do if they saw an actual crime show on TV. They want evidence. They want to see case files, DNA. That's what they want with true crime. But when it comes to these crimes, there's no trial needed because it's too emotional, right? There's no trial needed. There's no evidence needed. They just tell you the story, and then you believe the story. And they want you to get mad at people like me and other people out there who used to cover this stuff who don't anymore because they've eliminated us and replaced us with the alt-right media. But they want you to get mad at us for actually questioning the news. That's the point. That's what we're headed towards. Questioning the news being illegal. And most people out there only question the narrative, the opinion of the talking heads on the news. They don't question the news itself being scripted and staged. And it is. It doesn't mean that there can't be real victims. It does not mean that. There are going to be real victims in a lot of these cases, okay? Real victims who are in the line of fire, so to speak, because a Manchurian candidate who's been trained by the government to go out and carry one of these events out with no motive whatsoever, goes out and does it. They don't even know that they're doing it. Mind control is real. Manchurian candidates are real. MK Ultra is real. This is all stuff that's documented, that you can look up for yourself, that you can see, oh, there are government, this is all government documentation here, that they've done these types of experiments on people's minds, right? There's no lie to that. It's just a matter of if you can wrap your head around the government doing this. And you say, well, why would the government do this? Well, why wouldn't the government do this? Because what comes out of it? You start prosecuting people who aren't even committing crimes for thoughts, for owning a gun, for somebody else getting a gun, for your ideas or things that you're saying about the government, causing someone to hear it on social media and go out and carry out an act of violence even though you're not calling for it. That's how it works, to disarm the civilians, to take the civilians' rights away. That's what they're doing, okay? That's what these big corporations, the big government is doing. So the kid pops up at school, he enrolls 2 weeks prior, he's only there for 2 days, it's the second day. So it's the morning of his second day. Right? You have your trained interviewers, your trained, what do you want to call them? Actors who come out and tell you, well, let me tell you about him. I know him. Oh, he's quiet, doesn't talk too much. Instead of going, well, he's brand new. I don't know. He just popped up in the school. They don't want that on the news. They don't want to say he just popped up. The people who know him, the people who are being interviewed about, oh, let me hear about his character. Oh, he just popped up. Because then people go, wait, he just popped up. Well, what's his motive then? Oh, right. Well, there isn't one. Don't you usually need a motive? Why is it that there's never a motive with these people, right? If they're going to go to jail for doing this for the rest of their lives and possibly get the electric chair, whatever they give them these days, wouldn't you think that they would go after somebody who's really wronged them? Because usually motive is like the number one thing you look for when a crime is committed. What's the motive? This guy robbed the bank. Why? Oh, he needed money. He was dead broke. Oh, okay. This guy did what to his wife? Why would he do that? Oh, he was having an affair and he had an insurance policy? Oh, okay. Well, there's a motive right there. But in the case of these, there's never a motive. There's never a motive. Isn't that convenient? And there's also never a trial. We'll see with this case, if there is one. This is one of those rare situations where they're keeping the person alive, and it's probably going to tie into, if you watch how it unplays, he was abused, his father was MAGA, and we'll start going down that road where conspiracy theorists, again, become the new terror threat in the United States of America and around the earth, because that's what they're trying to do here, because they don't want you to wake up and snap out of this hypnosis that you're under. So, ladies and gentlemen, I hope this video helped wake people up. Again, do not forget this narrative with guilt by association. Do not forget this narrative. It's very important because, again, part of global communism is the state controls and owns the children. not the parents. That's a lot of the noise you hear going on around, oh, well, parents aren't letting their kids castrate themselves. They shouldn't be allowed to be parents anymore. That narrative is leading towards these mind-controlled sheeple out there who are obviously on board with this type of stuff because they can't think clearly. They can't think freely. They're under full hypnosis. Them wanting the government to have control over all children because it's going to continue to go that way. They're going to continue to criminalize Christianity. They're going to continue to criminalize people out there that are going against government narratives, and they're going to continue to criminalize, and they're going to try their best to arrest people who question the news because they're going to say that you're a danger to society, and they're going to create false flags around it. Don't be surprised one day if they create them around me. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.